Good evening. Welcome to the big story. I'm Regina Lake.
I'm Russian Hall.
And I'm Sean Yao.
Tonight's big stories: three separate rallies were held today, calling on the House of Representatives to act on the impeachment complaints against Vice President Sara Duterte.
The Agriculture Department vows to declare a food security emergency by next week. We'll deep dive into the state of economy tonight with NEDA Undersecretary Rosemary De Leon and economist JC Punong Bayan.
And President Bongbong Marcos says reports of espionage within the country are very disturbing. This is after authorities arrested 5 more alleged Chinese spies who were found to be surveilling Coast Guard assets in Palawan.
So, if you're wondering why traffic was almost at a standstill at a few major roads in Metro Manila today, and I certainly got caught up in the monster jam, this is one reason.
There were 3 rallies, not 1 but 3, from morning until late afternoon, calling for the ouster of Vice President Sara Duterte.
Protesters gathered over the People Power Monument in EDSA and Daliwasang Bonifacio in Manila and slammed House leaders for sitting on the impeachment complaints against the Vice President. Marian Enriquez has tonight's big story.
That's the battle cry of around 4,000 rallyists who turned up this morning at the People Power Monument in EDSA, following a march along White Plains in Quezon City. They came from various sectors, many from Magdalo and Akbayan Party List. Amid heavy traffic in the northbound lane of EDSA and a sudden downpour, everyone stayed put for what they came here to do: call out House leaders for their supposed inaction on the impeachment complaints against Vice President Sara Duterte. There are 3 complaints so far, with 1 endorsed by Akbayan Party List, the first to be filed, and which has been with the lower chamber since December 2 last year.
Anong petsa na? Dumaan ang Pasko, ang bagong taon, natapos pati Chinese New Year, pero hanggang ngayon, ang ating impeachment complaint ay natutulog pa rin sa Office of the Secretary General. Galawin na ang baso, panagutin na si Sara Duterte.
One of the complaints in the first impeachment move against Duterte is the grandson of former President Cory and ex-Senator Ninoy Aquino. Kiko Aquino D. also wonders what's taking House lawmakers so long to make, at the very least, the first step in the impeachment process.
Again, para sa amin, guilty na guilty si VP Sara. Kung hindi sumasang-ayon yung House, sabihin nyo na tama yung pagpatay. Sabihin nyo na tama yung paglulustay ng pera ng bayan. Please hear the impeachment now. Do your jobs.
Sara's ouster was also the theme in another rally, this time at Daliwasang Bonifacio in Manila. This protest action was led by the Taong Bayan Ayaw sa Magnanakaw Network Alliance, or Tama Na. The rallyists did not spare President Bongbong Marcos, who they believe is meddling in the impeachment efforts against his vice president. From Manila to Quezon City, Friday's protesters may be wearing different political colors, but they are all calling for accountability from Duterte. They're holding House lawmakers responsible too for the hold-up in impeachment proceedings when complainants are already willing to consolidate the basis for the case. The common ground of the 3 impeachment complaints: betrayal of public trust, based on the alleged anomalous confidential expenses of the Office of the Vice President and the Education Department when Sara was head. House Secretary General Reginald Velasco had said they are still waiting for a 4th impeachment complaint before putting everything together. On the other hand, some congressmen believe that even if the ouster move prospers in the lower house, it may only get rejected in the Senate.
It's not just a matter of impeaching a certain official. It's also assuring a conviction in the Senate. Most of them will be focused campaigning, in the coming days. So that would also be a challenge.
For News 5, I'm Marian Enriquez. We are One News.
Well, apart from that rally, there was another rally that took place at the EDSA Shrine this afternoon. Some 80 groups from the religious, agriculture, and academic sectors gathered against what they call the dark age of corruption in the country. Though protesting, the participants held a concert right in front of EDSA Shrine along EDSA Ortigas northbound. This caused a very heavy traffic in the area, especially given it's also a payday weekend. One of the known faces in the crowd was former Finance Undersecretary Shelo Magno, who once again questioned the spending of Vice President Sara Duterte.
Natawagan natin ng Kongreso na ituloy ang impeachment ni VP Sara. Unti-untiin nating i-weed out ang mga corrupt sa gobyerno para magkaroon naman tayo ng pamahalaan na talagang kapaki-pakinabang.
Among those who headed the rally was the activist priest Father Robert Reyes, who said it is not just the vice president who deserves to be impeached.
Impeachable ang napakaraming crimes ng mga matataas na opisyal ng gobyerno, including Bongbong Marcos. Yung pag-sign niya sa isang unconstitutional and corrupt and anti-people and anti-poor budget is impeachable.
In other news, the government will declare a food security emergency on rice on Tuesday next week. At least that's what Agriculture Secretary Francisco Tiu Laurel said in an ambush interview earlier today.
Well, natanggap na ng opisina ko kahapon while I was still in the US yung resolution that I have to sign as part of the board. Then by Tuesday malamang we will be declaring the rice emergency.
Recall that House lawmakers slammed the DA and the DTI last week for dragging its feet in calling for an emergency. Anyway, once declared, the NFA will be able to release rice from its buffer stock to local government units in a bid to stabilize the price of the staple. Under this rice emergency, some 300,000 sacks of aging NFA rice will be sold for 29 pesos per kilo, while 500,000 sacks of regular NFA rice will be sold at a subsidized price of 36 pesos per kilo to local government units in Metro Manila, which can then be sold to consumers at 38 pesos per kilo. The release of these stocks should also help decongest the NFA warehouses to make room for the harvest in the upcoming dry season.
Mababawasan yung mga laman ng mga warehouses at matutuwa na rin ang ating mga farmers na makakabili na ng ang NFA ng bigas mula sa kanila kasi meron ng paglalagyan.
Well, high prices ate into consumer spending, which in turn dragged down the GDP reading for 2024, as we were reporting yesterday. To discuss this further, we have with us on the line NEDA Undersecretary Rosemarie Edilion. Yusek Edilion, can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can hear you well.
Perfect. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. Let's start from a big picture perspective. So 2024 full year GDP reading came in at 5.6%, which was below the official target. This is the second straight year that the government has missed the official target. I understand from the press conference you've already laid out the reasons. For instance, extreme weather, there's geopolitics and weakened consumer global demand. But when you say that, you know, this is the new normal, what did you mean exactly by that? And what do we make of these numbers?
Yeah, actually, by that we mean that we're really entering what we call a VUCA world, volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. So you have all shocks, coming in from several sources, from natural sources, from external sources. Some are domestic sources, and therefore, like I said during that press conference, the objective really going forward is to build resilience, which is also actually the theme carried in the Philippine Development Plan 2023 to 2028.
But at the start of 2024, you were also at a press conference wherein you were asked why the government won't change the official target, which stayed at 6.5%, even though a lot of economists were already forecasting that we may see weaker demand this year. So this is in January 2024. And you said that there are certain drivers that could kick in for the economy later in the year that will boost growth. For instance, international tourism, for instance, the Build Better More campaign. What would you say in hindsight now? What would you say happened to those?
Yeah, that's right. We actually were banking on more tourist arrivals. for 2024, and that would have increased our export of services. And of course, we were also banking on global economic recovery that would have boosted our exports of goods. But this did not materialize. And just to say that, just to be clear, that the government actually sets a target. It's actually not a forecast. So forecast is really looking at what is the business as usual, but the thing is government actually puts in programs in order to influence this business as usual so that we can have better outcomes. And it would seem that those things that we have put in place, like for instance, we have actually put in a very aggressive tourism campaign, but it was not. Although the tourist arrivals actually went up, but it was still not enough actually to boost to reach our target. And it's really to do with the global economic slowdown and also the geopolitical tensions in those origin countries. So, and of course, also with respect to the exports of goods, that's also that turned out to be a big problem for us. We were banking on the increased digitalization, but the problem is there's still that subdued global demand, and as you know, there's economic nationalism happening also in other parts of the world, in the advanced economies. So that means that there has to be something else, another strategy, looking at economic diplomacy probably, in order to address, put in, so to speak, uh, more ammunition to our strategies.
Okay, Yusek Dillon, you mentioned that moving forward, we should look into building resilience. And it's not actually the first time you've said this. Years ago, you would say this every time there's a forum on a Philippine development. You always mention to invest in socio-economic, social plans, invest in, climate resilience and all of that. Do you feel, in your opinion, through the years that we actually have moved significantly to, have these buffers, in fact?
Yeah, actually, it will really take time building resilience. But for instance, with respect to agriculture, we have been investing a lot on irrigation facilities, which has been neglected for a very long time now. And with respect to this irrigation facility, it's not just the large scale irrigation. That's for the rice, that's for the water supply, that's for the power supply. But we're also looking at the small scale irrigation projects. That's for the high value crops. And this one has been the focus as well of the Department of Agriculture, as well as post-harvest facilities. Going forward, we will be investing in many more of the cold storage. So with respect to industry and then services, of course, there's the increased connectivity. And as I mentioned also during the press conference, actually 7 of the infrastructure flagship projects have been completed, and we expect 11 more this year. And therefore, of course, in the grand scheme of things, this is still not enough. We still have, as you know, 6 years to go here, and but is really a step going forward. So these things are, building resilience is not something that we can achieve in a very short span of time. But I would say that we are actually building it up, and we are putting in the initial building block, so to speak.
Yusek, when you said that the GDP slowdown was also brought about by geopolitics around the world, did that include also the standoff in the West Philippine Sea? And we were talking about this yesterday, about the effect of the POGO ban on the GDP growth. Did that have significant impact in heading into the last 2 quarters?
Yeah, actually, just to clarify, the Our GDP actually did not slow down because it was a 5.5 in 2023 and then a 5.6 in 2024. It's just that it fell below the target. Now, with respect to the WPS, sure, there was, of course, that would have exerted some impact on the economy. By how much we still do not have the numbers, but with respect to the Pogo ban, that would probably be the reason for why we're having this uh, the real estate glut for now. We have an oversupply of office spaces, and part of that is also because there's now changing preferences with respect to workplace arrangements, and part of that is of course the ban on Pogo. But we're hoping that soon this will be replaced by other micro small enterprises, the startups that they can take up this real estate property. And the good thing is now they have come down, the prices have come down, and I think they could be at more affordable prices.
Let me just do a quick follow-up to Gretchen's question. She did point out that growth was flat from the third quarter to the fourth quarter, both 5.2% in the last two quarters of 2024. But what surprised me was I expected, an uptick in the fourth quarter because of Christmas. Like traditionally, we see some sort of increased spending. I was wondering, Yusek, if you had any insights as to what happened there to our usual Christmas gastos, and it seemed to not be enough.
Mhm. Yes. Actually, again, just to clarify, if you're talking about the quarter and quarter, then that would be the looking at the quarter to quarter growth rate, seasonally adjusted. It's actually a 1.8%. So that's a pretty decent growth rate. And if you look at the spending, it's the spending on food and uh, and non-alcoholic beverages that have actually gone down. And I think it's really to do with the elevated prices. Oh, sorry, not gone down, but has moderated. But with respect to the growth in spending on transport, spending on recreation and culture, that has actually gone up, which is as expected because of Christmas, and so we did see that holiday spending happening, except that the traditional sources of holiday spending that was not there. But again, just to say that it did not go down, it was still positive, but at a slower growth rate. And just to say as well that last year, fourth quarter of last year, we were coming up from a high base. And that's the reason why, for a year on year, it's the same as the third quarter year on year growth rate.
Yusek, you talked about ramping up economic diplomacy to quote unquote put more ammunition into the government's growth strategy. Um, that's one thing that the president has actually been really focused on, which is to say to bring in foreign investors. And in fact, Finance Secretary Ralph Recto has just come from Davos in Switzerland at the World Economic Forum trying to sell the Philippines, accompanied by House Speaker Martin Romualdez. And I'm wondering whether all of these foreign trips are actually bearing fruit, or are we just continuing to see pledges that don't, translate into tangible commitments? What are you seeing?
It will really take time for the pledges to be realized, as in, it will be, as in we'll be seeing the brick and mortar factories. But we seem to observe a time lag of probably 1.5 years, because the investment pledges that were made in early 2022 and then 2023, we are seeing some of them actually materialize now. Uh, and of course, credit goes to the president himself and then the economic team, and of course Secretary Dec Go, who really took a lot of following up in terms of what is it that government needs to do in terms of facilitating the transactions, all those permits that have to be processed, so that these investment pledges or are become so that they be realized.
So there is interest from foreign investors. It's just taking a long time. Uh, any insight as to why that is? 1.5 years to make pledges happen? That's quite a long time. Is it still red tape?
That's one of it, and that's the reason why we have actually the ARTA, the Anti-Red Tape Authority, has actually been launching a very aggressive campaign for local government units and national government agencies to adopt this EBOS, electronic business one-stop shop. But nonetheless, having a one-stop shop is one thing, but the other thing is you really need to streamline regulations, and therefore, again, this one will take time. But just to say as well that as an investor, so once you make a pledge, it's still it will still take some time before, especially if it's in a different country, it will still take some time for you to have this realized, because you have to do your due diligence. You also have to raise your financing, etc. But especially with respect to strategic investments, then we already have Executive Order 59, which actually instituted what we call a green lanes for all these strategic investments. And therefore, uh, the good thing is we now have a point person, Sec DECO, and this investors that pledge their investments, and then if they qualify under the green lanes, then you can have your all those transactions and all those permits, etc., will actually be facilitated using this executive order.
Yusek, what's interesting to me in your presser is that you said that the government will likewise strengthen the implementation of social protection programs such as the AKAP program, Ayuda para sa Kapuasang Kita program, and the expansion of the 4Ps. Is there data already on this, that this has actually contributed to more businesses or more entrepreneurship or more ventures in the economy? And you also mentioned that the government will strengthen the utilization of digital technology such as the national ID and minimize leakages. Can you give us more insight into that and how that has addressed the poverty gap and social inequality?
Yeah, so this social assistance programs is really meant to address the vulnerabilities of those who would be affected by the transition. For instance, we're doing digital transformation. We are now going into more automation, more robotics, and therefore there will be those who will be displaced. And so you have this social assistance programs to to protect them, to tide them over as they transition. We do have some upscaling and then rescaling programs, but again, these ones will take time. And in the meantime, they have this social assistance programs. Now, the use of the national ID is really meant to increase operational efficiency, and we want to minimize fraud. For instance, we want to minimize cases like one beneficiary claiming assistance from two different barangays. But if you have, we require the presentation of a national ID, then a digital ID at that, then it can be checked right away. And so we're hoping to minimize leakage, of course, and at the very least, minimize fraud.
The NEDA play a stronger role in this? I do remember the president saying that the ACAP program or the budget for that will go through different agencies such as the DOLE and I remember NEDA. So will you be strengthening the guardrails around that budget of ACAP?
Um, the instruction to us was that we would help DSWD, so DOLE, DSWD, and NEDA will come up jointly with the guidelines in order to strengthen the ACAP program, make sure that we get the benefit to those who really need it the most, and of course minimize the leakage. And for the part of NEDA, we have included there a monitoring and an evaluation program. And again, this will be actually although we had ACAP before last year, but we did not include an M&E program there. And so what we want is have it done this year, an M&E program, and then also include the national ID in the registration itself and in the claiming of benefits. And we have included the Philippine Statistics Authority, actually. Yeah? I'm sorry?
Sorry, Yusek. Yeah, I thought you were done answering, but I think there's just some sort of delay. But here's my question. We have been talking about just this week, of course, that rice emergency that DA Secretary Tiu Laurel has been waiting for from the NPCC. We're also talking about a legislated 200 peso wage hike. How would these affect, our economic standing? Because I guess they're trying to address, like you said, would these be considered building buffers? I mean, who doesn't want to get extra 200 pesos, right? And who wouldn't want cheaper rice? But how would these affect our numbers moving forward?
Yeah, for that food emergency, actually there are two conditions that either of two conditions have to be satisfied in order to declare warrant actually a declaration of a food emergency. One is that there is a shortage, and the second is that there's unusually high prices. And so right now, with respect to rice, there really is no shortage, but what we're saying is that there's unusually high prices. But in the meantime, we do have lots of stocks in the NFA warehouses. So we're seeing that this could be addressed by NFA downloading its rice stocks and offering it for sale at lower prices. And so this one will actually help our kababayans who are really hurting with the high price of rice. Now, with respect to the minimum wage bill that is currently being deliberated in the House of Representatives, we have yet to see the details of that proposed bill. And as it is, our position is that we actually have already institutions that are in place to address these issues of the minimum wage, and we'd rather that we actually let these institutions do their work. But that said, we still have to wait for the draft bill in order to come up with a more complete position on this.
Do you foresee that all of these handouts, whether ACAP or AIX or a 200 peso daily minimum wage increase that's legislated, do you foresee that all of these handouts could then bring about unintended consequences like secondary inflation, which is what the economists that we've spoken to are worried about? So the idea for these programs is, of course, to protect the most vulnerable from inflation, but then with so much cash within the population now, that would also likewise bring up prices. What do you think?
Yeah, if ever, and I'm not like I said, we still do not have a complete position on the legislated minimum wage. But if ever that gets granted, it's not really a handout because it will be granted to the minimum wage earner. Now, with respect to the rice, this will be only for a very temporary period of time. As it is, I think it's for 500,000 sacks of rice for the 29 pesos, I think, and then another 500,000 for the 38 pesos per kilo of rice. So it's a very temporary thing, and it's really also to help the farmers when the harvest season comes in, so that NFA can again buy stocks from them. Now, with respect to ACAP, it's also meant to be a very temporary solution. It's meant for those who are displaced from work. It's meant for those to suddenly have this very catastrophic medical expense, and let's say another a funeral, or other expenses that they need to shoulder, and they don't have the resources to do this. So these are not meant to be something that is given to them on a regular basis, but it's really a stopgap solution for addressing their vulnerabilities, and so that they have they can weather the shock when it gets to them.
Yusek, you also mentioned recommending to the BSP an easing of the rate cycle. How much do you think could that be? And how do we somehow arrest the weakening of the peso against the dollar? Because it has been at 58, 59. Is it possible to bring that down?
And then to ride on to Gretchen's question, just very quickly, yes or no, do you foresee needing to change the official target of the government this year? Since we are at the start of the year, I think it's currently sitting between 6.5%. Go ahead, Yusek.
Yeah, okay. For the BSP, actually, we did not recommend. We're not really in a position to recommend, but we're just saying that these are the numbers that we're seeing with respect to growth, with respect to inflation, etc. This will also be the factors to be considered by the monetary authorities. They actually also sit in many of our economic meetings, and so they're very aware of the need to also make sure that the growth is not hampered by very strict monetary policies. But that said, with respect to the exchange rate, our BSP actually follows a market determined exchange rate. And it's really that when you talk about exchange rate, then clearly you also talk about what is happening in the rest of the world, because versus the goods and services of other countries, and therefore that is it's really us versus our trading partners. So that clearly is a very delicate balancing act. Now, with respect to the targets, if we're going to revise them, currently our target is at growth target is between 6 and 8%. It's a wider bandwidth, actually, and it's really because of the greater uncertainty, especially on the geopolitical side. And we will be coming up with a narrower band of this target as we get more data, as we are able to get some idea of the external factors, especially. Whether we will be revising it, that's for the economic team to decide, and we will be meeting sometime during the first quarter.
All right, we'll continue monitoring that. We're gonna have to leave the conversation there for tonight. We thank you so much for your time and insights, NEDA Undersecretary Rosemary Adilion.
Next, we'll be speaking to another economist about the country's prospects. JC Punongbayan joins us when the big story returns. Keep it here. Welcome back. You're still watching the big story here on One News. Let's circle back to our top stories for tonight. Rallies calling for VP Duterte's impeachment, skyrocketing prices, and the slowing down of the economy. Now, weighing in on all of those issues is JC Punongbayan, Assistant Professor at the University of the Philippines School of Economics. Thank you for joining us on this Friday evening.
Thank you, Gretchen, Sean, and Regina for having me again on the show.
Mukhang marami tayong pag-uusapan ngayon. Pero simulan natin sa naging kalbaryo ng mga tao ngayong gabing ito, ngayong Biyernes, which are the rallies happening in 3 different parts of the metro. We have seen political turmoil in the past months. We have seen high tensions over 2 powerful political families. Do you think that has had an effect on the economy, seeing the slowdown in GDP growth? How do we interpret that?
Well, it's really quite depressing, actually, if you look at the numbers. I wish, for example, that we could go back to the pre-pandemic times when economic growth was clocking in at about 6% per year, or no less than 6% per year. But to see growth rates of about 5%, for one whole year, that's really quite depressing because we've grown used to the idea of having 6% growth. I heard the interview with Undersecretary Edilion, who used to be my colleague when I was in NEDA more than a decade ago. I agree with her that there are external factors that could explain the slower growth. However, I would argue that, in fact, much of the decline of economic activity, economic growth, can be traced to domestic policies and the policies specifically of the Marcos administration. So if you look, for example, at consumption spending, which is the main driver of the Philippine economy, it's really the main reason why we are seeing much slower growth. And this can be traced back to the very high inflation rates we saw since 2022, which have since gone down, but we're still feeling the effects of very high inflation. So if the Marcos administration had done a better job of managing inflation in the first place, then we wouldn't be seeing such a weak growth of consumption spending now.
JC, let me just pipe in there. We heard already Yusek Edilion. Of course, she's speaking for the administration. So you've already heard and we've already heard what she says the government has done. But in your opinion, I was wondering to hear what you wish the government had done, what you wish they could have done. Were there options that they didn't take?
Well, if you go back to the year 2022, that was a time when there were debates about the timing of importation of rice, with rice occupying such a huge part of the basket of goods that is used to compute for inflation. So even a small increase in the price of rice will have a disproportionate effect on inflation as a whole. So that makes rice really a very political commodity, and it's really quite crucial for any government to abate any impending increase of rice prices, and a steady inflow of rice from abroad, even temporarily, could have abated rice inflation. However, you will remember that the Marcos administration kind of hesitated importing quickly, and that's one of the main reasons why inflation reached a 14-year high of 8.7% in January 2023. And the main difficulty with high inflation is that it kind of changes people's expectations of high inflation. So when people see that prices are skyrocketing, they tend to change their behavior because they expect that rice prices will continue to increase in the coming months or years. And therefore, it's really quite crucial to contain inflation in the first place and make sure that it is within the target band of government, which is 2 to 4%. However, we saw, as I mentioned, 8.7% inflation. So that, I think, is one of the original sins of the administration, not being able to contain that.
JC, since you heard our interview, I wonder if you could weigh in on the last question that I asked Yusek Edilion, which is to say that in the next several months, we are expecting more handouts. You're putting a lot of cash in the pockets of more people, yes. But the worry there is that it might cause some secondary inflation, some unintended consequences. Instead of helping cushion the most vulnerable from higher prices because there's more money in the market, then prices still go up. What do you think?
Well, you will have to contrast this, or you look at the context, because we saw during the pandemic that there was a significant increase in handouts, payouts, financial assistance, and it was quite necessary at that time. However, I think Congress found a way, or kind of discovered that, we can actually put such large amounts in the budget. And I think what Yusek Edilion neglected to mention earlier is that the 2025 elections are coming up. In economics, this is also called political business cycles, where incumbent governments make sure to boost spending in the run-up to elections, because that increases people's incomes, that creates jobs. So you will see at the same time that Congress put in so much money for ayuda programs in the 2025 budget, they also boosted allocations for so-called hyper-local infrastructure projects, which will be done soon, or maybe even after the elections. But locking in those projects means that it will benefit many contractors and somehow boost economic activity at the local level, all in the hope of increasing the chances of incumbents being re-elected in May. So I think that context is extremely crucial, and could explain why there are such big allocations of ayuda and infrastructure projects in the budget. So we're not denying, of course, that these projects will contribute to economic growth, but you have to remember that there is a spending ban in the run-up to the elections. However, notably, the Commission on Elections, if you will remember, allowed the DSWD to continue giving out AKAP, for example, Ayuda para sa Kapusang Kita, as well as many other projects of the DSWD. So it's not a real constraint on the ability of the Marcos administration to continue giving handouts in the months and weeks in the run-up to the elections.
Right, but yun nga, because there's so many ayudas, there's so many handouts, whether that's AKAP or IX, we should forget about inflation coming down this year.
Well, I think there are continuing risks to inflation this year. And I totally agree with the sentiment of other analysts that there could be second-round inflation, because if people are spending hundreds of billions of pesos in ayuda as well as infrastructure projects, then that will definitely drive up demand, aggregate demand across the economy, and push prices up. So I'm not totally discounting the possibility that we might see an uptick of inflation this year if there is sufficiently large projects in that vein.
Given all of that, what do you think of a legislated 200 peso wage hike? Will that help boost consumption, or do you think that will
Boost inflation.
boost inflation even more?
Yes, I think there's a real risk of it being inflationary as well. But again, it kind of belongs to the universe of projects under the Marcos administration of trying to help people to tide over their expenses because of the high inflation that we experienced in recent years. But number one, I think they're kind of justifying all of these ayuda projects, but in fact, if they had done a better job controlling inflation in the first place, then they wouldn't need to fund all of these things and even push for increases in the minimum wage. There's also a literature in economics. There's a debate actually in economics of whether or not increased minimum wages might increase unemployment as well, because some employers are saying that they might not be able to afford giving their employees higher wages, and therefore they might be forced to lay off some of their workers. But in fact, the evidence so far that I've seen is quite weak, and there's no evidence, empirical evidence to support this. So there are pros and cons as with any other policy.
What about this rice emergency that we are waiting for? We already know that rice, of course, and the movement of rice prices could severely impact our inflation numbers or growth numbers or consumption numbers. But is this really a good idea? Like you said, I think this has been an age-old problem, and we all know there's other ways to solve it that are not necessarily like a food emergency. We could just enforce, right? Or law enforcement agencies could step in. But in the absence of that happening, we have resorted to this rice emergency. Do we really need it? And what could be the impact of that? Because they've already lowered the tariffs on rice imports.
Yes, I would point you to the direction of one of the laws that were passed under the Marcos administration, which is the law amending the Rice Tarification Act of 2019. So under the Marcos administration, they actually reversed many of the policy gains that were done by that original law passed during the Duterte administration, which essentially liberalized the market for rice. However, what they did is that they put more power back in the hands of the National Food Authority, which could declare a food emergency such as this one in the event of impending shortages. However, if they just stuck with the original law, the Rice Tarification Law of 2019, then I would argue that we wouldn't be seeing such policies or band-aid solutions to the rice issue. However, I think for many reasons, like wanting to control the market for rice, because certain actors are in fact benefiting from it economically, they're profiting from it blatantly. I think that's the reason why they reversed or walked back on many of the reforms that we achieved with the original rice tarification law.
So has it not been effective, giving back powers to the NFA to be able to regulate and intervene in the rice market? Because we do know that hoarders are a huge problem right now, and what they're dealing with. For example, with the premium rice is hindi nagbababa ng presyo, tapos pinapalit-palitan yung mga label, hindi ba parang nagkakaroon ng semblance of control yung government by releasing those stocks and figuring out when to do that? Is it not just a problem of not being able to determine how much buffer stock they should keep and for how long? Because na-raise din yun sa program ni Ted Filon na another reason why they're releasing 300,000 sacks is because this batch is already aging and they haven't been able to figure out what the perfect level of buffer stock is.
Yes, this is the age-old problem associated with the National Food Authority. The business model of the NFA is that it's always at a loss because it is essentially subsidizing rice, buying a price at a high buying rice at a high price from farmers and then selling it low. So by the very business model, they're really bound to make tremendous losses. And that's one of the motivations why we wanted to move away from that system, because such a system is not sustainable. And the NFA in the past, it has been proven many times that it has inaccurate forecasts. It is not at all able to forecast efficiently the demand and supply for rice, and therefore is a losing proposition to give or maintain such power to the NFA. And that's exactly what the rice certification law tried to fix. But because of the amendments that were done under the Marcos administration, we're back to the original problems of NFA.
JC, since you talked about the budget, let's talk about the so-called blanks, even though President Marcos insisted that there were no damn blanks in the version that he signed. I know you've written about this. Supposedly the blanks were, a lot of them were under the agricultural portion of the BICAM report. What to you was the biggest issue there? There's a number of ways you can come at this problem, but what to you was the biggest issue?
Well, the biggest issue is that Congress has abused its power over the national budget. And the blanks are just one example of that. I think President Marcos is confusing the fact or the allegation that there are blanks in the budget versus blanks in the bicameral conference committee report. And I've seen for myself that there are indeed blanks in the BICAM report. And I think this is the issue here rather than, I mean, it's not at all an issue that there are blanks in the budget because there are no blanks in the budget. It's in the BICAM report that there are blanks. And the problem with the blanks is that it means that between the bicameral conference committee which was signed off by members of the House and Senate that are representing their chambers in the BICAM, until the bill reached the desk of President Marcos, someone somewhere inserted numbers, okay, without those numbers being checked by people in the BICAM. So in other words, the analogy of a blank check here in this particular context is quite correct. So that's a very alarming development. I haven't seen that done before, and it's alarming because it means that essentially someone monopolized the power to make changes in
I'd
the
like
budget.
to clarify
Yeah.
on the timing of those blanks because ang sabi ni Congresswoman Stella Kimbo ay kumbaga kino-compute pa, no? Ang question ko ay, yung ba yung niratipikahan na version ng BICAM, yung may blanco na? Or did it
Yes.
happen in the committee tapos nilagay nila yung may nalagay na nila ng amount tapos tsaka nila pinaratify? Can you clarify that part?
So I saw the document early on, the BICAM report, and there were already signatures of all the members of the BICAM, even with the blanks not yet filled in. So I think Representative Kimbo is misleading the public by saying that these are things that can be done unilaterally by the congressional staff. So we have to be clear there.
So you think, very quickly, JC, 30 seconds, you think that that version should have gone back to plenary or what? What was the proper recourse there?
I think the BICAM should have convened again and then settled the missing amounts in the blanks and then signed it off again before submitting it to the president.
So, kailan i-ratify without blanks.
Which basically giving up their moral authority over the power of the purse. We've run out of time, but we'll continue this discussion with you another time. It's fast, it's interesting. Thank you so much for joining us and your insights tonight. It's UP School of Economics Professor JC Punungbayan.
We're going to pause for a quick break. Right after that, a Filipino police officer was one of the fatalities in the mid-air collision in Washington, USA. We have more updates on the tragic crash when we return. Keep it here. Welcome back. You're still watching The Big Story here on One News.
President Bongbong Marcos says he is very disturbed to hear about the arrest of the 5 alleged Chinese spies in the country. Now, this comes after the NBI arrested 5 more suspected Chinese spies who were allegedly monitoring Coast Guard activities in Palawan. Authorities seized high-resolution solar-powered cameras used by the alleged spies and retrieved images of the Naval Detachment Oyster Bay in Palawan, as well as images of Philippine Coast Guard vessels in the West Philippine Sea. The government has yet to formally communicate with China on the matter. Investigations on the suspects' activities are still ongoing.
That's why we arrested them, because of course we are very disturbed by anyone conducting such espionage operations against our military. Dahil yung iba matagal nang nandito, nakapangasawa na ng mga Pilipina. At sleeper talaga. Baka naman, pagka nakausap natin sila, masabi sa atin, baka meron pa pang mga iba na maaari nating puntahan at pag-explaining kung ano yung kanilang ginagawa.
A Filipino police officer was among the 67 fatalities of the collision between an American Airlines flight and a Black Hawk helicopter over the Potomac River Wednesday evening. The PNP has confirmed that Police Colonel Perginto Malabed, chief of the Supply Management Division, was aboard the American Airlines flight on official travel when the incident occurred. Authorities have switched from rescue to retrieval operations and pulled at least 28 bodies from the frigid waters. In the first national tragedy of his second term, U.S. President Donald Trump implied without evidence that the Federal Aviation Administration's diversity initiatives are to blame for the tragic incident. He also wasted no time blaming Democrats.
We do not know what led to this crash, but we have some very strong opinions and ideas. I put safety first. Obama, Biden, and the Democrats put policy first. And they put politics at a level that nobody's ever seen, because this was the lowest level. Their policy was horrible, and their politics was even worse. The FAA website shows that the agency's guidance on diversity hiring were last updated on March 23rd of 22. They wanted to make it even more so. And then I came in, and I assume maybe this is the reason.
Democratic leaders slammed Trump, especially since a federal investigation on the collision has just begun and recovery teams are still retrieving bodies from the site.
From political fires to an actual fire, one that is actually still raging right here at home. Our big picture tonight is nothing other than the grass fire in Carasi, Ilocos Norte that broke out yesterday, January 30 at around 2 in the afternoon. Now, that area up north is a mountainous site with plenty of dried grass, hence the rapid spread of the blaze. The government has sent at least 80 responders to Carasi, plus assets, such as 3 Air Force planes to help put out the flames from above. As of 12 this afternoon, the Office of Civil Defense reported that the fire is under control, though it has already engulfed some 287 hectares of land. An investigation is underway as to the cause of the blaze.
It reminded me of the California wildfires, also in the United States. I mean, they're dealing with one tragedy after the other, and having that happen on the other side of the world, here in the Philippines, I mean...
But you can imagine, I mean, remember when there were fires as well in Benguet? Luckily, not near populated areas, but you would think that's the coldest province in the country, or one of the
Extreme
coldest
weather.
places.
That's why we're seeing slower economic growth. We started the month, you're right, talking about the California wildfires and ending the month. Today's the last day of January.
It's Feb-ibig tomorrow.
Feb-ibig. But anyways,
and President
very
Trump
worrisome.
doesn't believe in climate change.
That's worrisome.
That's very worrisome for all of us.
Well, it is a Friday, so we better put those worries to rest first.
Yes, I think the rallies might still be ongoing, or at least some of them. But for us, that's it for the week, and that's it for the big story on this Friday
and
night.
that's it for January.
And for January.
It is the final day of January, finally. Oh.
That was long.
That was long. It was tiring.
To another month, hopefully a better one. We are One News, all sides, all the time.
Thanks for tuning in. Have a good night.
Stay tuned, because coming up next is Play-by-Play with Andre Felix and Pauline Versosa.
What's up, guys?
Good evening. Happy weekend. Enjoy your weekend. Pero parang wala kayong weekend, no?
Parang
wala.
may something bukas.
Kasi bukas. Makikita-kita pa rin bukas. But thank you also again to Sean, to Reg, and to Gretchen. On the show tonight, we've got updates from the NBA, including the list of reserves for this season's All-Star Game. Plus, the latest from the final game day of the PBA Commissioner's Cup elimination round.
And we hear from volleyball star Rachel Andakis as she shares her goals now that she's back on the court.
I'm Andre Felix.
And I'm Pauline Verzosa, sitting in for Cheska Liton-Calao.
And here's tonight's play-by-play.
Puts it up. Unbelievable. Gemma on the left side.